Welcome to Kermode Uncut. Last week I did a blog about the fact that you need to see a film from beginning to end if you're going to review it, whatever the circumstances. And I was referring to a particularly poor film I'd seen called The Trust, in which the projector had broken down halfway through, but we had to wait until things got fixed so that we could see the film all the way through, because otherwise you cannot review the movie if you didn't watch it from the beginning to the end. And I asked what you thought about this. Looks like most of you agreed. Here are just some of your responses. This from Hrolfk. It's perfectly legitimate to be bored enough to leave and say so to anyone that asked, but you're quite right, you can't judge an entire film unless you've seen an entire film. You wouldn't give an opinion on a painting having seen just one corner. Richard Groves agrees, saying, it's that wonderful Spielberg mantra about finding the nugget in the boulder of coal. If you've not watched the entire length, then you've not seen the scene. I have to say, in this particular case, I did run the entire length of the counter, and there really was nothing worth picking up. This from Professor Bergman: the projector didn't break down, it committed suicide. And this I particularly like from Callus Max: I think you should watch it a second time. Continuity is important. You might change your mind again. And actually, I quote that because it did bother me at the time, wondering whether if we'd just seen the film play out in real time, it would have looked any better. I mean, frankly, it couldn't have looked much worse. However, there are two comments which particularly caught my attention. This was from David Wake, who said, you do have to watch something to the end. I directed something in the theatre that split critics. I got one critique that was negative handed to me, which had been written by a group who hadn't come back after the interval. They were particularly scathing about a theatrical device I'd used. It seeded something that had a payoff in the second act, but they didn't see that. It completely undermined what they were trying to say. My "you didn't see all of it" was a trump card every time. And worse, we couldn't enter into a debate because, well, they didn't know what they were talking about. So that's from a practitioner's point of view, saying quite rightly, you cannot judge my work if you didn't see it all the way through. But here's the thing that really intrigued me. This was a post by Trevor, who said, question, have you ever truly despaired at the first half hour and then gone on to love the full thing? No, really, has this ever happened to you? Not on future viewings, like Blue Velvet or AI, but there and then. And this really caught my attention. I started to think, is there a case of a film which I really hated it for the first half an hour, which I might have walked out, but actually I stayed and it turned into something brilliant? I started thinking about films which change sort of midway through. I cite all the time the case of Audition, which kind of starts off being a lovely, sweet, romantic comedy and then turns into one of the most terrifying movies ever made. I was thinking of Steven Soderbergh's Kafka. I mean, if you didn't see that all the way through, you could have come out of it thinking it was just some sort of strange black and white psychological drama and missed the entire sort of science fiction element of it. Kubrick's 2001, if you walked out after the first half an hour of that, you'd think it was a movie about apes. I mean, they don't get into space for a great long time in that film. But I was really racking my brains to think of an example of a movie which I really thought was rubbish for the first half an hour and then loved. And then I thought of one. Mamma Mia. You know, I watched the whole of the beginning of Mamma Mia thinking this is terrible. This could not get any worse. This is a plot entirely based around naffly reconstructed ABBA songs. And then somewhere about the 40-minute mark, something happened. I suddenly started to go with it. I suddenly started to feel myself being overwhelmed by the power of those songs. I suddenly fell in love with the sound of Pierce Brosnan singing. Honestly, if I'd left that movie after half an hour, I would have told you it was one of the worst films of the year. By the end of the movie, it was one of my favourite films of the year. I mean, I don't think it's good, but I absolutely love it. So my question to you is, it took me a long time to get to Mamma Mia, and that is the only example I can think of. What's your example? What's your example of the film that 30 minutes in you thought, this is terrible, this is rubbish, and you got to the end and you thought, I'm really glad I stayed?
I heard about you before. I wanted to know some more. Now I'm about to see what you mean.